Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today we're returning to our series of podcasts about the housing and homelessness crisis. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and the man who spent all morning cleaning the handprints off the glass ceiling. Wasn't it, Martin? You're down with that International Women's Day.
Absolutely, 100%. I think we should have one every decade or so.
More importantly and much more significantly, we're delighted to be rejoined by our first ever repeat guest in the Tortoise Shack, co-founder and CEO of Inner City Helping Homelessness, tireless campaigner, and tireless is the right word, Anthony, because it's been a rough old couple of weeks, Anthony Flynn. Anthony, thanks for coming back onto the podcast.
No, what was?
We've had a rough couple of weeks, Anthony, with the snow. Brought it all into focus.
Yeah, I suppose the last week has been pretty hectic, and I think Storm Emma, I think it knocked everybody out last week. You know, it was a serious week in homeless services, and I suppose right across the board, a lot of agencies have been working very, very hard and trying to get people in off the streets. And I suppose from our point of view as a volunteer agency, it was pretty extreme. You know, we were working 16-hour days. Some of the crew were working 24-hour shifts, and you know, over the 4 or 5 days, even the pre-planning from the Saturday to Sunday beforehand, and trying to implement contingency measures for the week was. Am
I right on this? You had to arrange contingency measures because there was bugger all coming out of government.
Oh yeah. What we saw over the week was a case of, you know, measures being implemented after we implemented them, you know, and a kind of a copycat series to it, which is absolutely fine if it's being done proper and it's being done right. But, you know, there was plenty of time for planning around Storm Emma, you know, there was plenty of time. And I suppose we learned from Storm Ophelia as well. When Storm Ophelia happened, we had to implement 120 contingency beds down in Borough Evans in the Capuchin Day Centre. Luckily enough that the statutory bodies actually implemented those beds in St. Catherine's, so that meant that we didn't have to do it. And I suppose from sustaining those as well as a voluntary organisation, I don't think we would have been able to do that for the length of time that was required. You know, we only had to do it for 2 nights up through Ophelia. It would have been 4, and having that man by volunteers right the way through. But there was other contingency measures right across the week. You know, mobile outreach. Our 3 units were on the road up to 16, 17 hours a day. We had our teams, our outreach support teams, walking the streets, you know, days beforehand to try and convince people to come in off the streets and take the opportunity to get in out of the cold. And I suppose that there was a big fear for life. That was the most serious thing over the week, was that if anybody did stay out, they were choosing to stay out to a certain extent. You know, but a lot of people have lost faith in the system. A lot of people don't want to go into hostels. They don't want to enter into a situation where they may come across substance abuse issues, or they may have come through their own substance abuse issues, and that continues on within these units. And I suppose there's a lot of the units, although many are ran very, very well, there's a lot of substance abuse issues within the units that are operational now at the moment. And that's what we were hearing out there on the street throughout that week, was that, you know, I don't want to go into a hostel because I don't want to have to face this.
So it's people trying to stay clean.
Yeah, you know, we've had individuals, and even after the storm, we've had people come into us and say to us, well, you know, we've been thrown onto a fold down bed in a certain unit, and you know, if somebody within that unit that is using substance, you know, and I went through detox, or I've been through a program, you know, and having to go in and share a room with somebody, you know, and everybody has their demons, you know, and I suppose the individuals that are there and that do have substance abuse issues, they have a right to be housed and they have a right to be accommodated as well. You know, they also have a right to have wraparound support services and have the opportunity maybe to access detox facilities or mental health facilities if required, and there's a lack of that right across the system at the moment.
We only spoke about the lack of mental health services. Like we spoke to Gareth Noble, and we spoke about the fact that they were spending more on Leo's strategic communications unit than they were in the budgets for mental health. And if you're talking about the most vulnerable in society, the people who are actually sleeping on the streets,
yeah.
You know, these are not, this isn't like, you know, we talk about these people that are really at the front line. What hit home though last week for me was the stage management of the whole thing. Yeah. There was a lot of stage management going on. Eileen Gleeson appeared on Morning Ireland and spoke about that they'd activated all these services, and that there was beds for everybody who needed them. The Taoiseach stood up and said that 12 people had been left sleeping on the streets. I know I'd spoken to Brian in your office, and the statistics don't back up, Leo.
No, they don't match, and I suppose right across the board last week, nothing matched up, and what we saw was a continued narrative coming from, and I suppose, the stuff that was coming out in the Dáil, and not defending the Dáil, but that's information that was given to them by the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive, and they are only speaking on what they actually are given. And the fact is that they were given misinformation, and I'll go so far as to say they told lies. And, those lies came from Eileen Gleeson's department. They came from, we had infactualities right across the week in regard to the number of people that were out on the streets or that were supposedly on the streets on certain nights. I think at one night over the storm, we had 47 people on the streets, and it was announced the next day in the Dáil that there was 12. That's totally infactual. That didn't occur. So where those figures came from, questions need to be asked, and people do need to, at some level. We heard there's going to be a review in regard to what happened over the week. I spoke to one reporter last week, and the DRHE went so far as to say that I had told lies in regard to the non-access of beds or no beds being made available, and that's totally infactual.
You were stuck for beds. You were actually stuck. You had no beds, isn't this?
Yeah, on the Thursday of the storm, we had Delta Communications had actually radioed us all up, and we were communicating directly on street with the guys, and we had a control centre set up in our office and the outreach support vans, so everybody was in tandem, and everything was happening in real time. And as we're hearing radios going and one outreach team reporting that there's no beds available. Now, the previous night there was no female beds available within the system. What happened there was we had rang in and we looked for a female bed, and we were told at the time that there was none, and to wait for a 10 callback system to access a female bed, which is totally wrong when you're at 8 o'clock at night and you have a storm.
You were all supposed to be indoors by 4 o'clock.
Everybody should have been in at that stage, and
a national red emergency was called. Get indoors by 4 o'clock. Employers had to close. The multiples, the bread rush was on, folks.
Yeah, and it was International Women's Day yesterday, and in Ireland last week we had a woman who was homeless and didn't have a bed.
Yeah, and not just one, we'd several, and to have to go back onto that 10 callback system and wait 2 hours or more to access a bed is just totally wrong. And I suppose what came out then, Ruth Coppinger had actually questioned the Minister, and she was fairly quick in regard to question the Minister on it, and I got a reply there yesterday or the day before from Ruth's office. Beds were made available later on in the night. So there was a number of measures taken in order to get those beds put into the system. But again, we had plenty of time to plan. We shouldn't have had a situation where we ran out of beds. And, we've been saying this for a long, long time. There's a number of people that are homeless that just don't want to access service. So, all of these people were coming out of the woodwork right across the country, trying to access a bed because of the storm and couldn't do that. And a lot of them, again, are felt that the system has let them down, and that's why they don't want to access those beds across the board. But, on the Thursday then, when we looked for male beds, there was no male beds. And then, the DRHE went as far as saying that we were telling lies when reporters went and asked the question. In regard to that, which is, it's totally shambolic. And, what we're seeing is it's a continued systemic failure, and it lies with the DRHE. DRHE is seeing a change in management there for the last probably year, and within that change of management over the year, Eileen Gleeson has come in over that period of time. Eileen came back out of the trap, in my opinion, last week when she was put out there front and centre stage. And, all of this stuff was staged. It was media. It was how to deal with it. Let's send the NGOs out there and let's get them to do a lovely video standing there saying about how many beds we have inside here and what we're doing. And, it was marketing. It was, the PR.
But that's on the back of the largest rise in...
It's the fastest rise in homelessness in the last 18 months was in the January figures.
Yeah. It's less than a month ago that they had come out, and quite a lot of them had come out and said, over the Christmas period, it dropped, there's your trend now.
No, yeah,
and so many people had come at me on Twitter when I said, that's not a trend, it always dips at Christmas, always dips. Mm-hmm. And all these Fine Gael people are saying, no, you're wrong, and then the next month, it's whack, bang up there again, more than anybody.
But you
expected.
always knew, Martin, that it was going to be bad because they delayed releasing the figures.
Well, we see that month on month. Like when you look at the overall in regard to children, like we're talking 188 children were made homeless in January. You know, that's
188 children,
you know,
in 1 month.
With 570 people in the overall total of homeless people. That's you know, adults and children, and you know, 109 families through January. That's a serious number through 1 month.
It's staggering. And then when you actually think about that, really, let's talk about what they said yesterday. They said, "Oh, and we won't prioritise homeless families anymore. We want them to." And this comes back to the Connor Skean's expression of gaming the system.
And when you look, it was Connor Skean's actual photograph that was front and centre of that article. Yesterday, and you know, when we see, in my opinion, what's happened there is there was a long-term plan in regard to homelessness and warehousing people and taking people from the big expenditure of hotel and B&B style accommodation, putting them into what I call, you know, and we spoke about this the last time that we spoke, it's direct provision, and that's exactly what it is. And we're putting people into direct provision centres. Some of the operators now that are actually there at the moment that are running these facilities have run direct provision centres over the years. There was a long-term plan here.
It's warehouse the poor. And Mary McAuliffe said to us that this is historically what we do in Ireland. We warehouse the poor.
She said two things. She said, we warehouse the poor and we always convict the poor of poverty.
Yes.
And she's spot on. We've convicted them of poverty, and what we've done then is we've said we can leave them over here in a box over there so we don't have to deal with it.
Well, it has become abundantly clear that Fine Gael will not build social housing, and that is policy. That's not accidental. It's policy.
You know, anybody who says that we don't need to build social housing, you know, needs to go and take a good look at themselves. You know, when we look at 6% of an increase in 1 month in people becoming homeless, 6%. You know, for our population and the size of our population, a 6% increase is a serious increase.
And we're a very underpopulated country in the European context. You know, we keep hearing all these people giving out saying we can't take in any immigrants because we've no space. We have abundance of space.
Well, apparently we have ghost estates that people don't want to move into.
Well, 6 ghost estates in Dublin alone is that are lying empty, and you know, we're not tackling that again. We've asked for a list of the voids. You know, what we're doing now is we're continuously questioning, and it's unfortunate that we have to go down the freedom of information route all the time, and we've done that on several things last week, and you know, things that went wrong, and asking those questions. Like last year, we look at January last year, there's a 29% increase on over the year in homelessness. You know, that's serious. 75% of the population of homeless people are now in the Dublin and the surrounding areas. So, you know, the likes of Meath and Wicklow and that. So Dublin and surrounding areas are you know, we are the capital, but we're overpopulated in regard to homeless people. You know, it's not spread around the country. You know, it's not diverse around the country in so far as, you know, we are seeing rises in Limerick and Cork and Galway, and, you know, people that we work with in those different counties, like Cork Penny Dinners, for instance, are reporting month on month again the same increase. You know, so there's nothing to actually stop this from. We haven't actually seen the highest.
No, and Owen Murphy said that. He said it's going to get worse before it gets better, which is just a cop out.
That's not going to do frig all.
No, it doesn't actually. What it means is I'm softening up the beachhead to say when it gets worse, I'll say that's part of the plan. Yeah. That's all that is. Now, where we have a huge problem, and again, what came out quite quietly yesterday was that the DIT, for example, in the new campus for the student co-living accommodation, we're charging €215 a week. Okay?
This is for this shared accommodation.
This is for student accommodation where you maybe share a room and you have a communal kitchen, maybe a bathroom and, you know, some facilities.
So that's your paid for hub.
Yeah, that's your paid for hub.
That's exactly what this is. And again, it's direct provision. But this is the nice direct provision.
This is the fancy one
where you have the big bean bag in the corner and the orange walls.
We might even put a pool table in a communal area.
You know, and again, it's the warehousing of people. You know, and you know what we need to do is we need to build up for a start. You know, we certainly need to be looking at high-rise apartments and high-rise buildings right across the country. But we need to go back to building social housing.
You do know the irony of asking to build up was that across from Leo's own home, he objected to a thing that wasn't even really high-rise. I think we were talking, was it 5 floors or something? So. And he objected, and he had it. There was perfect NIMBYism at play.
Well, we really are in this NIMBY situation, and the NIMBY is Fine Gael don't want social housing in any of their constituents' back gardens or areas because house property the prices are through the roof. The ABC ones, I think, in Fine Gael are doing them all the favours, and they don't want to rock the boat.
And again, it goes so far as to say that, it's looking after your own. It's a case of, when you look at what we're doing in regard to social housing now, we're pushing people into the housing assistance payment. We look at South Dublin County Council, all they do is support the housing assistance payment scheme. And people are forced to go into that rather than actually being given a social housing unit. And in hindsight, it actually, you're fueling the landlords.
That's all it is. Yeah, it's just a transfer of it's a transfer of state money
the demand
to private
is
landlords.
Yeah, the demand is there, but the supply is not. We haven't demand and supply. We're so far apart in regard to demand and supply now at the moment. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But their fear is that if they build social housing, that their ABC ones will see a drop in their house prices. Yeah. But as Mel Reynolds explained to us, in 40 years, that has never followed. Mm-hmm. Building social houses has never decreased the prices in the private sector. It just doesn't follow. But they live on this fallacy that that's what's going to happen.
The cost, we're talking over, the cost of supplying the housing assistance payment over a year, has went up,
I think it's
month on month.
It's 9,000.
No, we're near the billion.
Yeah.
We're at 900 million, I think, and we're going to pass the billion in the next matter of months, and because of the growth.
It's a simple transfer of wealth. It is a simple transfer of wealth from the taxpayer.
Who are they paying? Who's winning here? When we look at the hotels, who won when we were paying hotels? 48 million or 50 odd million last year. In regard to housing people, who's winning now in regard to the hubs? The private operators that are operating these hubs style facilities now at the moment. For instance, there's one company that's running several hubs around the city, and I saw an article not too long ago in regard, and we had done our own investigative piece on that particular company, and they were direct provision. They were a direct provision provider, before they were ever a hotel or a B&B, and these are all long-term plans that are being dished out and fished up between individuals, and ways of making money, or thinking up schemes of, when we go then and look at the HAP system, we're going from A, B to C in regard to, it's one or the other.
If you look at where we're actually sitting here in Ballymore, and if you look at Ballymore, and they took out the towers, which was social housing. Mm-hmm. Now look at Ballymore. You have, as you drive into Ballymore, you have a hotel that's housing homeless people on your left-hand side. Come down another 100 yards, and you have 2 student accommodation places either side of the road, flanking you at either side of the road. Mm-hmm. So they've done away with social housing, and they've simply replaced it with for-profit models for those in business.
And those that are going to profit all the time are going to be the landlords, and those that are running these facilities.
It comes back to the ultimate irony of the number of TDs in the Dáil who are landlords, and how they, say, if you represented the general population and said 6% of the general population are landlords, and yet in the Dáil it's 36%, so it's 6 times more. That's not even funny, folks.
No,
that's what if you want to talk about to me about moral hazard, saying, moral hazard of giving someone something in the house, or the moral hazard, I'm sorry, of you voting, using your elected position to represent your best interests.
How can you how can you go and vote and not vote in a way that you're going to benefit, along the lines in some way, shape or form?
Well, the crisis has spread from people who can't afford to buy a house to the guards, the nurses, even doctors, anybody who's not on a permanent job. You are now locked out of the market, completely locked. So it's sons and daughters of those who are voting for Fine Gael are now locked out of the system. locked out. They can't get back into it. And it's depending on mom and dad's wad of cash in the back pocket. That's how people are getting houses these days.
Look, we asked, well, you heard Leo saying, you go and get your deposit from mommy and daddy, who was fortunate enough to go and get a deposit from mommy and daddy to go and buy a house.
There's 5 in my house. How are they going to come up with 5 deposits?
Well, and then, further down the line, you're looking at a situation where we're not in a position now where people can go and just buy houses. It's a case of people are working to live now at this stage. It's a serious situation where, anybody going out there now and looking to try and get a loan or try and get on the property ladder, it's not as easy as it was all those years ago. And anybody then, with this whole locked-out generation that you see from, the Social Democrats have pushed this fairly staunch over the last number of months, where, people that are in their late 20s, early 30s cannot afford to go out, and the doctors and the nurses and, whether it be the guards or whatever, or people that are in distressed mortgages and stuff like that. And, we spoke about this crisis not hitting its peak or not, it's not at its worst now. These vulture funds are going to make this crisis, a hell of a lot more worse than what it already is.
I think it's important to say, in terms of the vulture funds, the best case scenario in all of if you play it out in terms of numbers, so if you displace people, let's use the ugly term that we're just displacing people, you're making them, whether it's temporarily homeless and someone else goes in, or, there's a change of ownership and tenants not affected. And if you, to multiply effect out, of that on the 47,000 mortgages that are at the stage of repossession that are sitting there over 180 days, it's a trebling of homelessness. Yeah. That's the best case scenario. That was based on a figure of about 8,000 homeless people. So you could treble that. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, because I actually think we had what happened. Why we haven't got it so far? Because the judiciary, the judges stood up and stopped some of this. Not the state. The state didn't legislate properly, and this stuff Fianna Fáil are introducing isn't really going to do a whole hill of beans either. It's kind of halfway there to putting manners on vulture funds. It's not all the way there. But the judiciary might actually, say no, whoa up the horses there, folks. And it comes down to, and I always say this in the Constitution, we have the right to housing. We don't have the right. The state should and not must. Okay, there's a if you could change one word in our legislation, you could actually ring fence those people's rights, human rights. We don't have
whatever way we look at people being saved in regard to these vulture funds. We are going to have more and more people that are going to come, and the first month of the year has shown how bad I think this situation is going to get. We spoke about how the numbers decline through. Well, maybe, landlords will let you stay in the house because it's Christmas, and we're not going to throw you out. No. We're not going to be the big bad man that throws you out over Christmas.
Because the publicity would kill you.
I can tell you every arrears management unit in the banks winds down in approaching Christmas. It's like the calls are less, the actual you're told, don't do that because you'll be on Joe Duffy talking about, the bank manager rang me and said,
Christmas Eve.
Christmas is cancelled. And so all of that's just corporate policy.
Stage management.
Stage management.
I tell you what's bothering me, Anthony, and it's been bothering me for a while. It's been bothering me. This time last year, I said by January next year, we'll have 10,000 homeless people. Yeah. And I said it this time last year. I said January's going to show 10th. Now, we're not quite at 10,000.
But we're not too far off it.
We're going to pass 10,000 mark without a murmur.
But we forecasted it, continuously forecasted this for since last year. We've said it month on month, and we're pretty damn accurate when it comes to figures and being able to next month it's going to be a hell of a lot worse. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist now at this stage to be able to put those figures out there. We've seen a big reduction in the amount of people that have slept rough through November, December. And that's because, extra beds were opened through the RHE. It took a long time for it to happen. We had continuous promises from the minister to say that it was going to happen. Eventually, we got beds, but these are not even beds that we're getting now. You know,
no, there's yoga mats.
Yeah, and yoga mats or a fold down bed, you know, and you know, and some of these units now that are out there, there's too many people in them. They're putting fold down beds in between beds, and you know, they're fire hazards to a certain extent. You know, we heard of one unit there over the last week that at 75 people in the unit was capacity. You know, that's overflowing at that stage, and you know, one night alone they had over 100 people in that unit. You know, and people sitting in chairs and people not being able to sleep. And you know, okay, we have got an emergency. We have to take people, you know, but we had plenty of time to plan for this emergency. We had plenty of time for people to actually know this is on the way. What do we need to do? Have we got a hotel that's closed in this country that we could, you know, let's open it, you know, and put people into the hotel? Or there was answers, you know, but the fact was that we didn't sit down cohesively together, as you know, everybody went and done their own thing. There was things that were doing very good, but nothing was doing great, you know.
Am I right when I understand that you guys had to drop food parcels and supplies to NGOs we talk about the NGOs and it drives me mad that the NGOs then, because the government refer to them as our partners,
we'll continue to hold our partners in service.
You know, like, I mean, service providers is another thing. I mean, get a grip, guys.
We've seen what I've continuously said this as well, that the homelessness has become an industry, and it's become a very, very big industry. And you know, last week we had a serious operation in place last week. And to get phone calls, and we didn't even get phone calls from this unit, and this is what actually made us think, well, hang on, we need to go and check the rest of these units. An individual that was actually put into a unit in Dublin City rang into the office and said, look, I've been placed here for a couple of days, and there's no food, you know, there was no breakfast. I'm here since last night and we haven't it. And this was at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the day. He was there from the previous night. So, you know, we talk about our partners. Well, our partners, you know, I got on to Peggy at Marks and Spencer's and said to her, Peggy, look, what's the situation? You're closing. She said, yeah, we need your food. You know, and within the space of an hour, we had vans and vans and vans.
I have to say,
full
fair
of
play,
food.
and absolutely fair play.
Yeah,
to
and you know, it was unbelievable that within the space of minutes we were able to get pre-packed sandwiches, pre-packed fruit. Anything that was needed. Our bakery was emptied out, and then what happened there was Centra came on board and they start ringing us and saying, you know, we have shops that are closing, and within we the food redistribution unit set up within 2 or 3 hours of that phone call. You know, and
I remember there was a couple of photos on Twitter, one of the shelves filling and one of the shelves emptying, and it was actually, you know,
the turnaround on what was going on there last week was unbelievable. So we started then to compile a list of the units, and you know, they won't give us a full list of all the units around the city either, which is ridiculous. But those that we did know and those that we've worked with, we started contacting them, and then another unit hadn't got, you know, and this was one of the units that had over 100 people in it, and they start running out of food. And they have a massive big kitchen, and they couldn't cook because we had nobody in the in the building that was HACCP certified.
Right.
Turn on the cooker and you know, heat up the oil, and you know, let's go out and get chips and frozen whatever and cook. You know, a kitchen that was sitting there lying idle with 100 people there, and because there was nobody HACCP certified, we're in the middle of an emergency here. You know, that stuff goes out the window.
Well, going on the figures the way they're climbing, we will hit 10,000 in and around Paddy's Day.
Oh, beforehand, easily.
In and around Paddy's Day. But nobody is marking that we have reached this. There's nobody in government saying we have reached this. This is a phenomenal, unbelievably bad place to be. But nobody in the opposition is saying 10,000.
Can I make one point? We go back all the way back when we started the podcast, and I sat down and I spoke myself to Constantine Gordiev, and if you remember what he said whether it's 1 or it's 10,000, it doesn't matter. The red line, there's no red line. He said they're just going to keep on going until the only way to have the solution for this is if someone actually turns around and says, in the morning, we're going to start working on a policy that it means that your child will be able to live somewhere with a front door and close to your school. That conversation, I've never heard that in the Dáil. They've never spoken about what is actually going to do to give people a roadmap out of homelessness. What they do currently is it's a conveyor belt. It's emergency accommodation, it's into the HAP system, it's into private landlord, and then you're probably going to go through and like in a washing machine, it just turns over again. Because if you're in a private landlord situation and he has a tenancy agreement that he wants to, and you're only, 12 months away from 12 months away from homelessness again.
Yeah.
And this is where we face, there's a deficit of leadership here, but they're controlling the message. They're not talking about 10,000. They're saying it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, I've seen two of my friends face renovictions. Now, you know what a renoviction is, where they say they're going to renovate and out you go. And renovate can be putting down a new carpet. It can be painting a door. Mm. There is nobody watching.
We've actually somebody that volunteers with us under the same situation now at the moment, and you know the landlord wants to put a new bathroom in and put the rent up, and you know, and she's worried about whether or not she's going to be there in 6 months' time, you know, and she's lived in the same unit for years and years and years, and she comes in and looking for advice on it, and she said, look, all they have to do is go and put a new bathroom in for £500, and you know, a new set of toils in, and they could have somebody else in on you know, an extra 300 a month in regards to rent. And that's the situation we're in. I think a big thing though as well last week was that all these people that came into the system that weren't previously there, you know, and we hear of and this totally annoyed me last week was, you know, the fact that they had come out and said X amount of people were foreign nationals. That so what? You know, what's that to do? What's that to do with the time of day? You know. Well, and they gave the figure of how many foreign nationals were in that system.
And this is the dichotomy here: is that Fine Gael are such. We had Brian Hayes in here, committed European. Yet when it suits them, these are non-nationals.
Yes,
but they are Europeans.
And I suppose,
doesn't matter where they're from.
You know, another big thing, you know, when all these people then have left or went away from the emergency accommodation beds and went back into where they've been, or, you know, into squats, into, you know, we've tents in areas in Dublin that people are nowhere near aware of, you know, and 5 and 6 people living in these little communities in tents, you know, in the back of fields and out on beaches and stuff. A big point I had made then, you know, we were getting phone calls in, or the radios were going in the office in regard to one individual, and, you know, this was the first time it was flagged. And I had 6 of these because last week we noted everything, all our figures, all our engagement. First time that I heard was a guy had requested a bed. He was homeless, but he wasn't actually registered. He wasn't on the system. So he was referred to a Garda station to go and register in the middle of a storm. Before
he had to get his public services card.
So the guys are on the phone. The guys are on the phone to the free phone, and they're asking them, you know, okay, I've got Tony Groves here, and no, he's not registered. Send him to the Garda station, get him registered, and then ring us back. So he needs to go and produce ID. Yeah. Well, he hasn't got ID. You know, there was so many barriers put in place over the last week.
To give that man a roof over his head.
And look, instead of bringing him in, getting him sorted, give him a cup of tea, you know, put him into, and then let's get the registration system sorted while he's there, while he's in front of us, you know.
Bureaucracy.
Well, no, you know what it is? It's keeping the figures down. You know? And it goes back, and, you know, we've absolutely no problem saying this. We've heard nothing but lies. We've heard nothing but the massaging of figures. We've heard nothing but bureaucratic, you know, shit from them, and that's it. And it's a stage now where over the last week, I think I've certainly learned a lot over the last week in regard to, you know, the faith in the system is no longer there. You know, at some point I thought that, well, you know, we can get the job done. You know, fly the flag and let's get out and do it. You know, we know the shit that we need to get done. We know we need to put the effort in. We know everything is not right with this system, you know, but let's try and correct it. Let's try and make things right. Let's try and make people as comfortable as we can. And, you know, the constant barriers and the constant, you know, walls that were thrown up around us over the last week, you know, it really showed me a very, very bad side of our system.
Okay.
You know?
And now you can move your chair over this side of the room, because now you're on the side of the room. The system doesn't fucking work. It doesn't work, and it cannot be fixed.
It's designed to fail.
It must be scrapped and replaced.
Well, you know, I've thought long and hard about saying this, but you know, I think that what we need to do is disband in the DRHE. We need to disband in the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive. And, you know, I know you've a problem with government, you know, and I'm definitely not going to go out and say that I'm here, you know, flying the flag high for Fine Gael or anybody else. But, you know, we've seen where the problem is coming from. And the problem is coming from council, and the problem is coming from the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive. It goes back to what I said in regard to the issues surrounding, the information that was given to the Dáil and the misinformation. And, I'm going to write to them and ask them for that information to be corrected in the Dáil, because we have those figures. But, those figures came from NGOs. Those figures came from service providers, statutory bodies that are there. And what we've seen a continued systemic failure from the DRHE for years and years and years now, and they're going so far now as to put the barriers down, the blockades up, to feed people misinformation, to, not give journalists the answers that they're looking for, to, in a roundabout way, not answer the question, but answer the question that's being given to you. But the fact is, the people are suffering. Lives are at risk, and certainly last week lives were at risk in regard to, I can't stress enough how, when they say our partners, we went out and we worked with organisations and agencies last week that done amazing work.
You were out on the streets in the worst of weather. You found people who had never been homeless before. Yeah. You organised food for people who were hungry. Now, that's your side of the partnership. Where was Owen Murphy?
He was his sleeves rolled up.
On fucking camera, getting selfies every 20 minutes.
But now hang on. 3 things. Owen Murphy was doing his job. Okay. Second thing, there was a lot of stage management.
Definitely.
Third thing,
definitely,
the stuff that they said it was necessary for them to come out and have those meetings, whether it was actually of any benefit to people on the front line, but it did. We thankfully people aren't dead.
Stage
but I think
management
people aren't dead because people like Anthony,
yes,
were working 24-hour shifts to make sure that nobody died.
Yeah, but you did not think it was Leo's job to get up and tell people to get indoors. It was his job to do. He did his job.
We see, what you said is stage management, and what I totally agree with that. When I look at that, what was going on and real time stuff on the ground, and us, we had to call ambulances to take people in. We had to drive people into
section.
Well, that was my next. I've a big issue in regard to that case, and and I'll go so far as to slam the NGOs and the statutory bodies, because that person, and she is a person, has been continuously ignored by the system, and we've been engaging with that individual for a long time, and unfortunately, what should have happened was that should have happened a long time ago. It shouldn't have took emergency like this for that to happen. Again, it goes back to the systemic failures, the lack of supports, the lack of wraparound services, not being able to access mental health facilities and stuff like that. But what's happened is, and I'll accuse the NGOs of this, and I've sat my hands for long enough in regard to keeping quiet when it comes to the failures of some organisations, and that woman has been ignored. She's been ticked off on a check sheet in a box for months and months and months, and people saying that they've been out there with her, and I know because my team have been out there with that individual every night of the week, for the last I don't know how many months. We can go back 6, we can go back 8. There's been concern for safety reports logged with me for a number of times in regard to that individual. And, she did not want to come in. But, we had done our job insofar as making the report up and sending the reports in. We couldn't go and drag that individual from where she was. Kitty Holland wrote about the story. And let's go and let's say stage management, because that's what it was. The photograph of where that individual was, the story being given to the Times. This is not a good news story, but it's not a bad news story, but we're going to every single effort to try and make sure that we take everybody off the street. And we're going so far as we're going to section people to take them in off the street. That woman was failed. She was failed by the system for a long time. A lot of people have to put their hands up. And last week when I saw the story, and I didn't want to discuss it in media because it was something from our crew's point of view that's been very close to heart, and that individual has been looked after from to an extent, and unfortunately we couldn't do any more. But the statutory bodies that have more power than we have, and
it should never have been allowed to get to that.
No,
it should never.
But the fact of the stage management, Tony, that's where we're looking at. Why was there a camera there taking photographs of that? Why was the press able to put that story out there, in the matter
very
of...
intrusive.
Because it's not only intrusive, it's planned, it was pre-planned, it was organised, it was... And, I'll go back and say to you, I had this conversation about sectioning people with the Minister himself a number of months ago, because he was out on the streets with us and we spoke about it. He asked me the question, what was my opinion on it? And I said, well, we cannot section people unless we have a proper mental health problem with that individual. If somebody chooses to stay out, we have to identify whether or not they have a mental health problem, or whether or not they're staying out because you're not doing your job and they can't go into a hostel because there's no wraparound support.
But now they've crossed that Rubicon. Yeah. Now you're at the stage where, well, if you don't want to access the paltry, utterly fucking useless services we offer, well, then we're just going to section you.
Well, Martin, that'd be all well and good if the person, these people who are so vulnerable, if they've been provided with a mental health assessment, if they've been provided with, as you call it, wraparound service. I keep hearing this horrible word that's coming out, that they keep saying, triage, that we and triage is in the hospital when you fall and you bruise you sprain an ankle or something. Nonsense, folks. There's no support structures and it's literally at the very last second, this is what they revert to, and you're quite right. To do that and then have it as a story and have it as a thing, it gives the impression.
But everything was a good news story, Tony. It was a case of last week when it came to, let's report there was only 12 people on. That was lies. It's total lies. It's utter nonsense to come out with a figure like that when they knew. And we got a phone call from a state-run agency for us to go to Donabate. To collect a couple that were in Donabate, stranded in Donabate, that were homeless, that were living there and camping there. Can we go at 11 o'clock at night to collect them? It was tit for tat. That's what it was last week, and it was absolutely disgraceful to see that that state bodies and statutory bodies
were engaging.
Engaging with that, and we had in part of our contingency plan was that we had. Like previously, we had contacted Lifeline Ambulance and we had used them for transport and stuff like that. And we were that was the whole weight of the service was thrown behind us, and that's there and available. The next hour, what we see is an 8-seater van, with 4 support workers and a photograph up on Twitter saying, well, we have transport to take everybody. We rang in looking for people to be transported. They couldn't transport it. Then when they rang us to go and collect somebody from Donabate, we've only got a 3-seater van. We haven't got well, hang on, you had a big picture there last night of an 8-seater van. It was just tit for tat. Well, anything you can do, we can do better. Instead of working together and cohesively and picking up the phone and saying, look, can we all get into an office here? Where's your support centre? Who's operating from where? Let's all get in and work together. We could have done a hell of a lot more better if people were working together. I hadn't got time last week to be sitting and, slating or throwing up. My job last week was to ensure that the people that we engaged with, and they survived. And when I saw through our own media platform some of the stuff that, as I say, the tit for tat stuff that was coming back and forward, I hadn't got time to engage in that. But then when you sit back down and reflect on some of that and look at it and the pettiness around it, which you're not paid for that. They're not paid to do that. You're not paid to make anybody look good. You're paid to do a job and provide a service to those individuals that require it. And, a lot of individuals were let down, through the system. Like the individuals that couldn't get a bed because they weren't registered, And then I get a phone call from somebody last week in regard to that. Well, what do you mean when you said exactly what I said? They couldn't get a bed because they weren't registered. They weren't on the pass system.
And I suppose if I want to just give this put this all in context, this is going to happen again, because that's the problem. I can feel in you, and we've known each other now a few months now, and I can see the frustration in you. You really are.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You're really furious, and there's no 2 ways about it. So from my point of view, we really value the work that you guys do. We try to support you whatever little ways we can. But what happened last week clearly was one big smokescreen as well, because you got to remember on the flip side, the government themselves were facing their own storm for messing with the media manipulation.
Yeah.
So it suited them to have this other agenda.
God sent.
It really was.
And then release the figures in the middle of a shitstorm as well.
Yeah, of course
so
you do.
One big continuous smoke screen.
And I agree with you that the government is acting in bad faith, and I'm being really pleasant by saying in bad faith. We're about to pass 10,000 this month. Where is the fucking opposition? 10,000.
The opposition is the government.
But where are they? You
Yeah.
would think when 10,000 people are going to be homeless in a month, that the opposition between them, all of them, could organise 10,000 protesters just to mark it. Just to say we're not going to let this go by without marking it. Nothing. Gelded, the whole lot of them. Gelded. Fine Gael are weak. They are able to be taken down, and we have Fianna.
They lose votes. They lose votes in the Dáil. 2 or 3 in a week. They lost a couple of weeks ago.
Fianna Fáil are sitting there like fluffers at a porno movie.
Backing it up.
That's what they're doing.
But it's not just Fianna Fáil, guys. You got to remember. There's a march for homelessness in the
7th of April.
7th of April.
But we passed 10,000.
We will pass by.
Why is we got this huge vacuum of space where nobody's saying, that we should be out on the streets. This should be an issue.
Because it's become socially acceptable. It's a case of people were disgusted at a time. When we look back last year and all these figures start coming out, and then we saw this big increase, and people were disgusted. Now there's no disgust anymore, and it just becomes socially norm. It's sure there's the homeless figures again this month, but people are not actually seeing what's going on the ground. And look, from our perspective, what we've had to change our whole dynamic in regard. Like last week we saw what was going on the streets and dealing with the storm. This week we implement a new family support unit because we're inundated with the amount of families, and that's a reaction to the figures being released last month. Our own figures that we're seeing people coming through the door with kids and families, and there's nowhere that kids can come and rather than sitting in an office environment, we're putting a family-friendly room in place, with sensory room for people that have problems and our children that have issues. And it's a case of us reacting in a way that we're trying to make it more comfortable for the individual, a one-stop shop as well when it comes to information and what they require. The lack of information out there is just sickening, Don't give them any information, because if you do, they might use it against you.
Well, that was said yesterday in terms of just the new change in let's not give them let's not prioritise them, because what they meant by that is if we do that, you're going to encourage them to stay in emergency accommodation.
Well, I mean, exactly what you've said there. What I put to the council was a number of weeks ago, and you've just taken the words that were said while I was sitting in a meeting with the council. I offered the council a number of units around the city, short-term lets within these units, where rather than having somebody in a hotel, and the cost of these were half the price. One family a month in the Gresham was costing €9,000 for 2 rooms in the Gresham. All right, so the cost of these units were coming in at less than half of the price of accommodating these families within. They wanted to push these families into the hub style narrative. I had, some independence for the family where we can give you a 2-bedroom unit. It'll cost half the price for the month to put the family in there, and they have their own washing, cooking, cleaning facilities within that 2-bedroom apartment. Oh no, we can't put families into 2-bedroom apartments because they might want to stay there. They might not want to leave. But it's about making these families as comfortable as possible while they're going through probably the most emotional situation that they could go through in their lifetime, being homeless. And the answer was, no, if they get too comfortable, they might not want to leave. And so it's just absolutely sickening to say.
The irony of this, we're 100 years on from when we decided to become our own nation. And that week in 1916, when that first kicked off, the Gresham Hotel had the hoi polloi in the Gresham when it kicked off. 100 years on, what's in the Gresham? Homeless families.
Well, they've been evicted. They were made homeless again because the Gresham threw them out.
I mean, is anybody looking at this in a historical context and saying, we are worse fucking off now than we were under the Brits? We were worse. We're worse off. The homeless crisis is worse than it ever was.
And it will continue to get worse. It will continue to get worse unless we put proper systems in place to tackle the crisis. And one of those systems needs to be to disband the Dublin Region Homeless Executive, appoint a CEO of a housing and homeless agency, that has powers for direct build projects. Take it away from the council, because they're just not doing it. They're not building. So, it's a situation where we need, and whether it's another Quango like Irish Water, but we need to get it, and I would be supportive of that. No. But we need to have something to get the job done.
But you need something with executive power.
It needs to stop at one person. Yeah, it needs to stop at one person. Eileen Gleeson is not that person. People up there in the DRHE at the moment are not those people. I understand they're under pressure. I understand that there's a lot going on. They can blame the minister can blame them. Fact is, job is not being done. If you were in a normal 9 to 5 job, Monday to Friday, and you were the CEO or the director or anything like that, and this situation was, if you were losing money on a weekly basis, the way they're increasing the amount of people that are becoming homeless, you would be sacked, you would be fired, you would be put out the door, But yet, what we're seeing is a continuous effort of, let's cover it up, let's put the smoke screen up there, let's say we're all doing a great, great job, But, we're doing a job good, but we're not doing it great, And it's not good enough not to be doing it great, because we're messing with people's lives here. So,
as I said, last January, I got out the calculator. I looked at the rate of increase in people being made homeless that had gone on for the year, and I extrapolated to January this year, and the figure came out if nothing changed, it would be 10,000 January this year. And I did it for the hospitals as well, and it would be 700,000 on the waiting lists. Now, I'm a gobshite with a calculator with no experience.
Very easy.
Yeah. And I could predict last January that there would be 10,000 people homeless this January, and that there would be 700,000 hospital waiting lists. And that was simply because I took as the factor that they would do fuck all to fix it over the year. Fuck all. Now, you can do the same this January, and you can extrapolate the numbers for next January, because they're doing fuck all to fix it.
And it's going to get worse.
And it's getting worse.
We're fearful of what next month, we're due February's figures now shortly, and when they're late,
wait till Friday evening at about 6:30, just after the 6-1 news, after the news runs, because you need the 6-1 news to be in the can, and then you can get it out, guys. It's stage management. Oh no,
cynical.
Look, and they actually criticised. They said it wouldn't happen anymore. We'd be up front with our numbers, because let's face it, they haven't been up front with the numbers.
Up front with their dodgy numbers.
Martin, yes, they were still counting. Only a few months ago, we were still counting, plugging into the ESB as a house being built, right? So they manipulate statistics. Again, people need to know that's the mandate here. Anthony, have you anything?
No, that's me. Don't give an out for it.
No, but you're right, Anthony. Why are we letting them away with this shit?
Well, look, I think this week, after we've reassessed, we've had a look at what we thought went right, what we thought went wrong. And I suppose it's about informing people now of that situation. Last week, everybody was very, very busy in regard to trying to get the job done from our end of things.
Yeah.
We certainly weren't sitting up in big boardrooms with cups of coffee and writing down stuff in pieces of paper. What we were doing, we were out there at the cold hard face of what was going on, and ensuring that people were comfortable, and even as far as putting 4-hour checks on people that weren't coming in, that were staying out there. So this week is about reassessing what went right, what went wrong, and giving people the proper information, and letting them know that, no, there wasn't 12 people out there that night. There was 47 people out there that night. The amount of phone calls that we went through. And as a voluntary agency, for our guys, I can't thank our guys enough. We had one incident where one of my coordinators, actually, she wrote off her car on the way home, after she was heading back to Bettystown after spending umpteen hours over a 3-day period in the office, and she went home.
Right?
Yeah, she's fine, but when you look at the other individuals that were there with us, we had to send people home and put ourselves down to a skeleton crew. But over the couple of days, we had 50 or 60 people that worked with us. And the work that they done was absolutely unbelievable. They put themselves at risk at times going out there onto those streets, driving those vans, ensuring that other people were safe. And whether it was someone that was there to make tea and coffee, or somebody that was out there on the street and dealing with people, those are the people that need to be thanked, And again, the front line, the emergency services, the nurses, the fire brigades, the civil defence, the people that were out there at the cold hard face of things over that week. I certainly can't thank my crew enough over the week. So,
well, Anthony, I just want to say, I know myself and Tony want to say thanks to you. Thanks to you for doing what an incompetent, uncaring.
Hates the minister, doesn't he?
Does, yeah.
Government.
He's actually all right.
No, I'm not talking about, and it's not personalities. It's and I don't like getting into personalities. It's the fucking government as a whole.
Mm.
It's the government as a whole and a gelded opposition who simply allow it to happen. It's disgusting.
We failed as a nation, that's my opinion. We failed as a society in regard to allowing this to come to the stage.
Society is kind of good. Society wants to see this problem solved. The problem isn't society.
We're not doing enough to solve
it. The problem is that you're electing, okay, I'm going to say it, wankers who won't do it.
Well, I'm gonna temper that on the basis that we have a huge fault in the system. The DRHE is clearly not fit for purpose. It's not delivering the sound. The mood music coming out of it is actually diabolical, because what it is it's part of a campaign to normalise homelessness, and a part of a campaign to make sure that people understand that we're doing as much as we can when we're not. We're inefficient. We're not working cohesively, and we're actually and the as you call it, tit for tat, the bickering, that just people fall through the cracks, and that's what happens with it. But I do want to say thank you to you and your team, and I actually want to thank you for coming on here as well, because it means a lot that you came back to have a chat with us, because it's great to be able to say that we're going to speak out now. Really, you've a great team there, and full of admiration for the work you guys do.
And we won't hold you much longer. We know you are busy.
Next up.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Cheers, guys.
Listen, folks, I'm just going to say thanks so much for listening. But if you do give a damn like we do, ICHH.ie, get on there, give them a few bob, make sure you chip in, because they're the people who are there feeding our people.
And just one last thing. Opposition. It passes 10,000 very shortly. Where are you? Where are you?